What alarms me is not only the spike itself, but the complacency that greets it. There is a certain numbness that develops when a problem feels too vast, when individuals believe they cannot alter the course of policy. Yet, history has taught us that silence is never neutral. To remain silent in the face of rising inequity is to endorse it. The true measure of a society is not found in the wealth it accumulates, but in how it protects its most vulnerable. Health care, in its essence, is an expression of compassion organized through science. A covenant that says every person deserves the chance to live free from preventable suffering. When that covenant is broken, no nation, however prosperous, can claim moral success. We must understand that the roots of this issue are not simply political. They are ethical. They speak to whether we view health as a commodity to be purchased or a right to be preserved. To treat health as a privilege is to forget that illness knows no income bracket, no party, no ideology. Disease is the great equalizer, and access to its prevention and cure must be the great unifier. As costs rise under this plan, we risk dividing our nation further between those who can afford to live and those who quietly endure what could have been prevented. There comes a moment in every era when society must decide what kind of future it will tolerate. We cannot build a humane civilization on the suffering of those priced out of its protections. We cannot call ourselves advanced if our medical triumphs remain locked behind financial barriers. Progress without humanity is regression. True progress demands empathy, foresight, and the courage to say, "This is not acceptable." Let us be clear. The responsibility does not rest solely on policymakers or institutions. It rests on each of us. The voice of the public has always been the catalyst for reform. It was the voice of the people that demanded clean water, safe medicines, equal rights. It can again demand a system that places health above profit. The challenge before us is not only to recognize the rising costs, but to rise ourselves, to insist that care is not for sale, that compassion remains the heartbeat of a civilized nation. There is a moral dimension to the question of rising health care costs that cannot be ignored, for it reaches beyond policy and into the realm of conscience. When I look at the current state of our nation, at families crushed under the weight of medical bills, at the elderly rationing their medications, at the young foregoing preventive care because of the cost, I see not just a failure of economics, but a failure of empathy. A society that allows the cost of care to climb beyond the reach of its citizens is a society that has lost sight of its purpose. Medicine was never meant to be a privilege reserved for the fortunate. It was born of humanity's collective desire to relieve suffering, to preserve life, and to serve the common good. The moral question, then, is simple: who do we wish to be? A nation that prizes profit over people cannot endure without consequences. We are witnessing those consequences unfold in overcrowded emergency rooms, in preventable deaths, in the quiet despair of those who feel abandoned by the system meant to protect them. It is easy to discuss health care costs in terms of numbers, but those numbers conceal human stories. Behind every increase in a premium is a mother postponing treatment, a worker skipping check-ups, a child who goes without needed care. These are the faces behind the statistics, and they compel us to ask whether we are truly living up to our ideals of justice and compassion. when costs rise unchecked. Health becomes a currency, something bought and sold rather than shared and safeguarded. This commodification of care diminishes not only the poor, but all of us, for it transforms the most sacred human endeavor, the act of healing, into a transaction. We must remember that the strength of a society lies not in its wealth, but in its willingness to extend care to those who cannot repay it, to heal another person without calculation of gain is to affirm the deepest truth of our humanity. Science has given us the power to conquer diseases that once devastated generations. Yet, what good are these triumphs if they remain inaccessible to the many who need them? The true measure of progress is not in the sophistication of our medicine, but in its reach. The vaccine, the treatment, the cure. These are not symbols of progress until they serve everyone. This was the principle that guided my own work, and it must guide us again now. The rising cost of healthcare presents not only an economic challenge, but a test of national character. We must decide whether we will continue to allow human lives to be measured by their purchasing power, or whether we will reclaim the moral foundation upon which medicine was built. To do the latter requires courage. The courage to place compassion before convenience, to value collective well-being over political victory. The solutions will come not from ideology, but from empathy. And empathy begins with the recognition that every life has equal worth. When we understand this deeply, sincerely, we will no longer accept a system that puts a price on survival. There comes a moment when every society must decide whether to accept the world as it is or to work toward what it ought to be. The revelations of soaring health care costs under the new plan confront us with precisely such a moment. We are no longer dealing merely with statistics or policy drafts. We are dealing with the moral pulse of a nation. We stand at a crossroad between complacency and conscience. One path leads us further into division and inequity, where health becomes a luxury. The other leads toward renewal, toward a system guided by fairness, foresight, and shared responsibility. The choice, though it may appear to rest in the hands of lawmakers, ultimately belongs to all of us. In my lifetime, I have seen that every great transformation, scientific, social, or moral, began not with authority, but with awakening. People realized that they could no longer remain spectators. They understood that progress is not inherited. It is earned through courage and cooperation. This truth applies now as much as it ever did. The rising cost of care will not reverse itself by chance, nor will justice arrive through indifference. It will come only when individuals, communities, and leaders recognize their shared role in shaping the future. Change begins in the collective will. In the moment a society decides that the current reality is not acceptable, we cannot speak of responsibility without also speaking of hope. Responsibility is born from the belief that what we do matters, that each voice, each action can alter the course of events. Hope without action is sentiment. Action without hope is despair. The union of the two creates progress. If we are to restore balance to our health care system, we must believe that it is possible and act as if it depends on us, because it does. Each person who questions, who demands transparency, who insists that care be affordable and equitable, becomes part of the engine of change. This is not a battle of politics. It is a test of principle. No law can endure unless it aligns with the moral rhythm of its people. And the moral rhythm of humanity has always been compassion, the instinct to heal, to help, to lift one another from suffering. When we speak of cost spikes, let us remember that behind every policy debate lies a moral question. What do we owe to one another? If the answer is anything less than fairness and dignity, then we have already failed the test. We must summon the same courage that has guided every great endeavor in human history. The courage to imagine a better order and to work toward it. However long the path, the future will remember not the figures in a budget, but the choices we make now. Whether we defended profit or protected people, whether we stood by or stood up, the time for silence has passed. The time for shared responsibility has arrived. And if we act together, guided by compassion and reason, we can yet create a system worthy of the people it serves. A system where health is not a privilege, but a promise fulfilled. Imagine a world where survival depends not on science, but on your savings account, where the cure exists, but you cannot reach it. That world, my friends, is not a distant possibility. It is quietly forming in front of us. Across our nation, states are revealing a harsh truth. Under this new plan, the cost of care, the cost of simply staying alive, is soaring beyond reach. And the question we must face together is not, can we afford to fix it? But rather, can we afford not to? When we speak of the rising cost of health care under the recent Republican plan, we are not merely speaking of economics. We are speaking of lives, of human dignity, of the social fabric that binds us together. The reports from multiple states are not just numbers on a page. They are reflections of real suffering, quiet sacrifices, and the slow erosion of trust in a system meant to protect us. Across this country, citizens are learning that the promise of affordable care is slipping further from reach. Premiums are climbing, deductibles widening, and out-of-pocket costs becoming insurmountable. These are not abstract changes. They are decisions forced upon families who must choose between a child's treatment and the monthly rent, between the medicine that sustains life and the fuel that heats their homes. The future will judge us, not by the power we held, but by the compassion we showed. Health is not a commodity. It is the heartbeat of a civilized world. So when the choice lies between profit and people, between indifference and empathy, may we always choose humanity. Because someday, someone we love will need the very system we end today. And when that day comes, let them find that we did not stay silent. We stood you